Hello, you're very welcome along to another episode of the Tackling Sport podcast. It's Daniel here, joined alongside me by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
And we've got Premier League predictions later on in the episode, but delighted to welcome on the line Portlaoise Senior Ladies manager Stephen Duff. Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Hi guys, how are you? Good to see you again.
Not too bad, keeping well, Stephen. Like, we were planning on doing a bit of an Inter-County Championship preview in a couple of weeks, but we had to get you on. Just in the world of GAA, there's a lot going on. But firstly, with yourself, can tell us about your own experience, because last time we spoke to you, you were heading into that county title with Portlaoise Senior Ladies. Well, how did you get on, and then what the subsequent events had led to?
Yeah, so we had a really good week. That week we had our first ever, Portlaoise Club's first ever senior county title win, beating Sarsfields on their course for the 8th in a row, which was great. We enjoyed that weekend as much as we could. But 7 days later, we had our first ever venture into Leinster. And we have now qualified for Leinster final against Foxrock Cabinteely, which was due to be last Sunday gone, yeah. Losing kind of concept of time with these lockdowns. But it was supposed to be last Sunday. That got postponed, and we've got a date now of January 17th. So that's where we're at. Great achievement for the club, great achievement for the girls. A lot of them girls have been on that senior team for up to 15 years, and had only ever reached, suppose, 3 county titles prior to this. And the club despite Portlaoise being an overly successful club in the male code, the ladies have struggled to replicate that, and it was a target of us this year to try and get the same support and same footing as the lads did, and the girls achieved that, and they're going to push that on a bit further, and we're going to continue to try push that on and try cement our places in Leinster a bit better than than they have in the past. So yeah, that's where we're at, and good week all around, and then or good 2 weeks all around, and then with Ballyfin male side, we actually qualified for our second ever semi-final. Which first one was last year, second one was this year by beating the Heat. And then we were kind of prepared for this, but in Laois, due to the second lockdown that we had, all games were postponed until after Laois are finished in the championship. So we're looking at earliest being 21st, 22nd of November, COVID pending, and pending Laois losing to Dublin in the Leinster semi-final. And again, giving us
plan ahead, I think.
Yeah. unless Desi has really shagged it, I don't know. I don't think there's any other day.
Well, listen, just before we move on to the county thing, so January 17th, maybe focus on Portlaoise ladies more here. Was there much communication in terms of, because it seemed a sudden announcement from the GA?
It was really difficult. When that message came through from the GA management committee that everything was being cancelled, I was actually on the call preparing our logistics for the Sunday Leinster final. An email came through, and I read it out to the guy I was on the phone to, and the both of us laughed, saying, that must be a mistake. The games are surely going behind closed doors and not being cancelled. And it was only then when I flicked over to my Facebook's page and refreshed there, and I could see everything was cancelled. Extremely difficult for us as a squad and as a group who had never won and never ventured into Leinster, and then to have achieved all we could have and done all we could have in that competition, to have that taken away from you 5-6 days out from a Leinster final was bitterly disappointing. From an organisation and coaching point of view, it's so difficult now to try and keep girls motivated, keep girls focused, and keep girls fit for a January 17th date. What we've done is we've let them go for a couple of months, so 6 to 8 weeks are going to be away from us. They'll be given home plans, home workouts like they were in lockdown, and then we'll hopefully get back on the field in December, try to get them back to a base level before Christmas, and then taper in on football after Christmas. But it's just a nightmare situation to try and plan. But look, we just have to react to what it is. It's out of our control. You just wish that maybe if the GA and the Central Committee and Management Committee and whatever titles they have, maybe they've had away to 12 or 14 more hours, they might have seen that we weren't going into level 5 lockdown, and maybe these games could have had a 10-day window to say, right, lads, you've got 10 days to get your championships run off. They're all behind closed doors. The pubs are going to be closed. You're responsible for your own club's activities. Anything that seems to be bringing the game to disrepute, you will be punished for it and sanctioned for it. So that would have made the most sense to me, but they've been really conservative in what they've done, and maybe a bit of protectionism is going on here as well to protect the Inter-County Championship. seeing as they are getting that €50 million support scheme from the government, and it is the cash cow of the GAA. So, but lads, actually, since we discussed last, our idea of GAA Go has taken off, so I think we should take credit of that. Put it down to tackling sport.
Absolutely. Get on to our club. What was it, the club county split season episode where we basically just talked about. Now we might have been stating the obvious, but it's still like the GAA haven't been doing the obvious for years, Stephen. So I guess the frustrating thing on the club being called off, it was in a reaction a few weeks ago to the Black Rock parade, amongst other things. Although that was more or less referenced without in everything bar name, and I guess this was going on all over the country. Look, whether we like it or not, it was. And I guess they were probably the only one to put on social media. You want to come in, Sean?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't get what the GA expected to happen. Look, I think the Black Rock, the hurling thing is just, I think it's just the worst of the worst in terms of this year. But like, how they expected clubs not to celebrate, and that's the problem. I thought there was no, there was no increased measures. Like the government could have maybe agreed a plan with the government to, if a team wins a county championship, that they can have an extra gathering or something like that. Because look, teams are kind of left on a limb. You think of some of the great stories this year, like Killadangan in the Tipperary Senior Hurling title. Like, do you expect them that they didn't celebrate, in a non-socially distant way? Like, and I just think the government, I don't know about you, Stephen, but I think the government might have just left clubs in the lurch a little bit, and maybe they could have agreed something or brought in different measures where if you have the celebrations, that you might isolate for 2 weeks afterwards or something like that, because with everything that came out afterwards, it just seemed that GA blamed the clubs where maybe the clubs were left in limbo.
Like for me, when John Horn came out, and it was kind of like, let's punish him after it was just, they could have been a lot more proactive about what went on. They claim an email came out warning clubs that if you're to continue to behave like this, there will be sanctions. But in that email, it just said, no more, try avoid team huddles, try avoid team photographs. There was no of, lads, if you continue like this, everything's going to be cancelled. There was no mention of that. There could have been a lot more proactivity from the GAA's part and the government's part to let them know that this is a possibility, that this was going to happen. Like you said, Sean, teams are going to celebrate. We celebrated ourselves. There was 200 fans in O'Moore Park. They weren't allowed onto the field after this. It was stewarded very well. But the players were hugging, crying, arms all over each other. And then some of their parents, when they went over towards the trophy presentation, some of their parents were there and they met them with a hug. That's happening across the country and more, I would imagine. 10 times more. We're seeing up in Donegal, we're seeing all these kind of areas that it's just happening. It's natural. And for some reason this year, the droughts are being ended and the first time evers are happening, and it's just massive celebrations. And they could have been a lot more proactive about this, and they could have communicated throughout as we're coming up to finals with reminders of saying, guys, like measures need to be followed and guidelines need to be followed, or we're disappointed with what happened last week and this is why we're disappointed. Can we try and pull this together? But instead of sending out an email and saying no more team photos, no more huddles, and then 4 days later cancelling everything, it just seems like, to me, and I said this to you, Daniel, is that it seems like they're just protecting the inter-county season, and that's in some ways fair, but to the club player who is 95% of the organisation, it's just a little bit unfair.
Absolutely, yeah. And I guess the GA's come a long way since they were calling out Ronan Glynn in the middle of all this. Do you remember what happened? A bit of madness on their part, to be fair. I think they try. I think for that situation, they try to ride the anger of a lot of people, but even some people were like, "What are we doing?" Calling out NEFIT, who are looking after public health. But anyway, moving on to a story that broke there last week, and this is a story that's been ongoing. Stephen, you've been in these circles for ages, and I know you've mentioned this to me in the past. And I guess for people outside, women's football and Camogie would probably not be aware of this. And the GA have had these struggles, but they always do seem to deal with it okay in terms of if there's a football and hurling clash, that they work it out because, they're under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
The LGFA and the Camogie, there have been a lot of clashes recently, and you can give a couple of examples. What's happened lately, and what was voted in Congress there in Camogie?
Okay, so this probably started back in February when it started in day one, which is as long as LGFA and Camogie are a part of the GAA, which is a long time. But this reared its ugly head again officially in February when the LGFA went to their Congress with this exact same motion that Camogie went to, and for acknowledging dual players. Everything right? Acknowledging dual players, and that was turned down by Congress as well. So what happened then 2 weeks ago in Tipperary was pretty high profile, was when Aisling Maloney came out from Care GAA to kind of bring to the attention of the public and outside of Tipperary what was going on. She was being asked to play, and her teammates were being asked to play a Camogie County final on Saturday and a ladies football county final on Sunday, which, just to make everyone aware, is the norm. It happens across the country, all over it. But this was happening to Aisling Maloney and Ashley McCarthy and Roisin Howard, who are three quite high-profile players in LGFA and in Camogie. And people were shocked to hear this went on, but this is a regular occurrence. Okay, it was happening to our own Portlaoise that weekend. We were in a county final. We were lucky enough that football was first, from my own personal point of view. But that's not the point. The welfare of the players needs to be the point, and they're the only people who seem to lose out. So then, where it got to kind of real prominence and national prominence was at the weekend when the Camogie had their national conference, and the same motion was not passed to acknowledge the rights of a dual player and that they would try and facilitate dual players when it came to fixtures. And it was unanimously voted down. I think it was 77% to 22%, 23%. So it's something that is just it happens across the country. It happens weekly. Games being played days consecutively. It's something that needs to be fixed. In my mind, it's an easy fix. Let's put it all under the one umbrella. The LGFA were invited into the GAA a couple of years ago, and they said no. I have my own opinion on that and why that happened, but it just needs to be fixed, because the only people that seem to be losing out here are the players and the girls who do play. And for whatever about county, okay, if you can't play dual at county, that's because of the levels that are expected of you. You should at the very least be able to play dual at your club level. And there should be facilitated for you, and every opportunity should be given for you to recover after a game and then go play another game. Why can't they go on consecutive weekends or vice versa? I don't know. I know there's fixtures headaches there. I wouldn't sit in the fixtures committee, but there needs to be forward-thinking people on this, because the only ones losing out are the girls.
Yeah, and you think it's just bonkers that, like, you know, in this day and age, that in sports where we're losing players after the age of 17, 18, 19, and then you're having these headaches almost week in, week out. And what do you think can be done? You know, you said there that, you know, they've been asked to come on board, that the GAA are really pushing to get them under the one, you know, umbrella again, if you like. Do you think maybe ban them, or not ban them, but block Croke Park as an example, block more funding? How do you think?
But Stephen, just the example before you come in, the good of this is the LGFA getting 50,000-60,000 at Croke Park that I genuinely wouldn't have happened under the GAA. I reckon the GAA would. I don't think they would have done as good a job of promoting that final, for example, as the LGFA have done, just looking in from the outside. But what are your thoughts?
Like, just I follow on from your point, Dan, as well. The great work is being done, and like the sponsorship of Lidl and that campaign, they wouldn't have got that with the GAA. Where they're like, 100%. For their own organisation to be able to chase a flagship sponsor like that, and for Lidl to push so much in the last couple of years is huge. And I know today they've announced the club championships are going to be sponsored by the credit unions, the current account.ie, their new credit unions. So like there is great work being done there, but logistically and operationally, we're not functioning for the grassroots player. Like, we're not. It's, from my own point of view, Portlaoise this year, like, our girls are playing a Camogie match on a Friday and a football match either on a Saturday night or Sunday morning, and that's week out, week in, week out.
So two matches in a weekend.
Oh yeah, most weekends. And if not, like, there was 1 week there where there was 4 matches in 1 week. So like, you're there preaching about
basically.
Yeah, you're preaching about recovery. You're preaching about best practice as regards S&C, and then this is happening, and it's just, you're seeing girls at the ages of 17 and 18s who are on physio tables every single game, and they're 17 and 18, and it's something that needs to be looked at. And what's the solution? For me, it's coming under the one umbrella. They want to protect their own power, they want to protect their own independence, and they want to protect their own positions and salaries, probably, if we're being honest about it. But it needs to be really looked at, and what's the best solution here for the playing population, and not who's sitting in an office in Croke Park, because it's the players that are losing out. They deserve an equal footing, if not a better footing, than the men. Their game needs to be promoted, and they need the opportunity to play for their club and represent their club and the people who they've grown up with since they were kids.
Absolutely shocking. We've actually linked a couple of tweets about that Camogie motion and I guess the motion was defeated off the back of the LGFA doing it. But it's like you said, Stephen, it's just, I don't think anyone can disagree with you that 4 games in a weekend for any players is ridiculous. But we do have a little bit of breaking news here, and just moving on to into Inter-County, and we wanted to speak about a couple of people who have come out and had their opinion, but in the last few minutes there, so we're recording this about 10 a.m, that the GPA have asked their membership if they want the Alliance Leagues and Championship to proceed. So that's a kind of big step, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming.
No, it literally just released in the last 5 minutes.
By John Fogarty in the Irish Examiner. And I think, there's been a lot of talk, even the last couple of days, a lot of tweets which we'll get into. But, it does seem that the players are the ones that ultimately should and maybe will have the final say in this. And I think it'll be mixed by a lot of players across the country, Stephen. Yeah. And I don't know about your own personal opinion, but you've been in and around a lot with players and inter-county players, even across both codes. And what do you think? Have you heard much in the background? What do you think is going to happen over the next week or two?
And just before you come in, Stephen, just on the questions that have been released them here. So which the following options reflects your opinion for the upcoming 2020 season? Number 1, I want the season to proceed. Number 2, I want to play only if the implementation of the COVID-19 protocols is improved. Or 3, I do not want the season to proceed.
Okay, that's pretty clear in what there's 3 options. Okay, so for me, like from our own personal, for the 3 of us chatting here, and for people listening in, we all want to see the inter-county season go ahead. If there's another lockdown for our own headspace, we'd love to be able to watch live games. It was something that was really lacking in the last national lockdown. And I've had a conversation with you, Dan, about this. Is it doesn't stack up to me in an amateur situation how these players are in a so-called bubble when they're not being rigorously tested and they're not living together. They're probably living in college in another city and traveling an hour and a half to 2 hours back to train, or they're living in the far side of the county. Now in Laois, that's only half an hour away, but say you're in Cork, you could be traveling up to 2 hours to get to training in Cork, and it doesn't add up in all the rest of the guidelines that we're seeing across the country. That how can we protect these players, and how can we protect their families, and how are we going to control a scenario where if there is an outbreak in a team, that it doesn't get into the community, because these players are in the community. Like we look at the Fermanagh situation last night, they were rejected on their request to postpone the game against Clare, and like they have a fair argument. They've got 10 players in isolation who are only coming out of isolation on Saturday, and they want to play a game on Sunday. It's a fair request, and Clare, to be fair to Clare, they said, yeah, we'll play midweek in a neutral venue, but the CCCCCCC, how many C's you want to put into they have CCCCC, okay, 4. No, that it'll have to play on Sunday for the integrity of the competition and whatever else. Like it's just like this is going to happen, it's going to continue to happen, and like it won't be long before, and we have to ask the question, if it was Dublin or Kerry or Galway or Tyrone or Donegal in the same scenario and they couldn't fulfill the fixture in Division 1, would it be the same? Would it be the same rules for everyone? I don't know.
And then if it happens to David Clifford or Conor Callahan and Noel McGrath or someone like that,
like you're right, because if Fermanagh players, it's not getting the traction in the media it needs. But like you said, if it is
it's those kind of blurred lines with that. And look, I think everyone wants to see the safe return of inter-county football and hurling and everything that it brings around, and the excitement and just the general, adding something to everyday life. But, I think everyone is worried, because what makes the GAA so special is that the players are the community, and they're involved in clubs, and they work locally, and they're genuinely in the community. But, if you've got someone like, you think of some of the young Gaeltacht lads, maybe Brian O'Beugly down in West Kerry, travelling from the Dingle Peninsula into Kearns, just outside Killarney for training, and then going up to play Dublin in a match, and just all the, he's from an isolated part of Kerry, and maybe God knows if the virus got brought down there, and then all of a sudden it's because of him, he was playing for Kerry, and I think that's just some, players mightn't understand that, and it mightn't affect some of the city players, but those rural players could really feel it.
And also on the side of it, it's a different game now than what it is at the club game. And how I mean by that is, I won't mention the teams, but I was at a practice game last week, an inter-county practice game that was here local. And I was like, where are all the players? All the cars were there. everyone was there, and I forgot they were in dressing rooms. And the dressing rooms in this place that they play the game, I know from experience, are very small. Very small. You would struggle to fit 30 in there sitting down. And that was before COVID, it would have been uncomfortable 30. So if you're during COVID and you've got 30 from an inter-county point of view, plus the management that inter-county teams we know carry, in a situation that we're in, plus showers, plus sharing of cars, because there wasn't buses there, it was cars. And we all know not everyone drives, so they have to share a lift somewhere. It's not adding up. It's a different game to what it was at the club. The club, you can manage it a bit more. It's local. You know everybody. If somebody is stuck for a lift, you can get them masked up. You can get whatever else it is. They fill out their questionnaire. They don't use the dressing room. It's all outside. And we know the risks are a lot lower. It's 18 times less likely to contract the disease outside than it is inside. We know these facts. But that's changing now. And you can't not ask someone to shower when they've travelled from Cork to Fermanagh for a game, or Cork to Mayo for a game. You can't expect them to sit in a bus or a car wet, because then we're going to see the flu-like symptoms. And without a rigorous testing facility, with all the travelling that's involved, with the operational side of it, it just doesn't seem to be stacking up. And maybe, and this is maybe selfish of me, and people can disagree with me, but maybe the right thing to do would have been let the club finish the club for the year, and we start back in inter-county in January, February time, like we normally do.
Yeah, I think the GBA is kind of reacting, and a couple of those points you made in terms of those COVID protocols, it just sounds, by the way they phrased it, like, again, from myself not being outside and I hadn't been to a practice game and not aware that that these protocols weren't probably being adhered to as much as they should. Just getting to a couple of tweets that we were going.
Sorry, they're allowed to use change rooms. Inter-county teams are allowed to use change rooms now.
Sorry, yeah. So that's
they're allowed to use buses as long as they're socially distanced. So teams are having to hire 2 buses to get their entire management squad and teams to games, which is costing more than what it costed prior to COVID. So, and
you're right. And it goes back to they're trying to replicate the Premier League bubble, but they're not getting tested twice a week. A, and B, these players are just going home and told to not pretty much do anything. Do you know what I mean? To keep that bubble when they got home, where the GA players are all working full time. And I think that's the issue. And I know some of them working from home, but you want to come in, Sean?
Yeah, and like you said about the buses, and teams aren't going to be able to constantly social distance for practical reasons rather. And I think that the problem is that there's the under 21, the men and female senior and minor, and I think it's just I think there's too many things happening, and I don't know, because I think, look, the thing about underage minor and under 21 is, again, you're getting younger people who have more and more social contacts. They're in college or they're living with people, and I think it's just too many variables, if I'm being perfectly honest. And to think how many cases are here, and especially north and south, because that was one of the huge issues in the summer for the GA was, the idea that the north and south and the 6 counties in the north, and maybe would they be left behind. And I think you think of how many cases are in Derry. Are the Derry lads going to be come to a plane? Or some of their mothers, nurses? How's it going to work?
Yeah, and Longford, they asked for their game to not be in Derry at the weekend. They've made a request to the CCCC again that we move our game to a neutral venue, and that was rejected because they're not comfortable going into Derry. So where does that continue on? Like, are we at a starting point here? Are we at a peak? Are we at a leveling off period, or is it just going to get worse? And there's more areas that are going to get worse. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that for the GA, they're probably in their sense too far down. There's too much committed on this. There's too much riding on it. The idea that there's people in rural parts of the country that are ready for the games to start, but I just think sense should prevail personally, and I think there should be a lot more looked into it. But I think the GA themselves are too far down, and I think the players are in the mindset to play again.
And just to read one of the tweets, John Hesden there, one of the best footballers in the country, actually, in a Westmeath footballer. At what stage does the inter-county return badly needed in these grim days? And that's in quotation mark commentary end. I'm concerned from a health and welfare perspective, both individually and collectively, for those contributing to the inter-county season. And it's almost like that tweet kind of last night, got a lot of people talking, and even Eddie Brennan has come out. He's the least senior hurling manager. I personally would like to see it go ahead with a lot more stringent COVID-19 protocols, but like I can understand completely the health and welfare aspect of it.
You think of like the celebrations that surrounded Laois's, Joe McDonough win, and also the win against Dublin in the championship. You think to yourself, if Mayo win the All-Ireland football this year, or if Wexford even win the Leinster and win the All-Ireland football, like, are they going to be stopping people, the Wexford fans dancing at the crossroads? And that is like, there's a difference between club, and I think there's a lot of people in the country that, mightn't necessarily be connected with a club, but are 100% connected to the county, and they live for those days going to Croke Park, and maybe their families moved on and they've no connection to their club anymore, in terms of players. But I think the county is such an integral part, and I think people are maybe missing that. Not only the celebrations from the players and everything that surrounds it, but if Mayo or Wexford or something happens, like you said, it's the year of the first time evers. If something like that happens, how are the GAA going to stop that? And I think that will just be the ultimate, and I think that's what people need to start thinking about almost.
Yeah, and like we have to remember, and I don't want to be too harsh on anybody here, that it's amateurs who are running these county boards and who are running this at a grassroots level, and they're going to be in charge of Casement Park, and they're going to be in charge of O'Moore Park, and they're going to be in charge of O'Connor Park, and ensuring that everything has been done to a high standard. But these are amateurs; like, they're not health and safety officers, they're not qualified in health and safety or quality or anything like that. Like, so they are doing their best, but is their best up to a level, like we said, of the Premier League bubble where everything's being maintained and there's a team that are going around hosing the showers, hosing the dressing rooms after teams, whatever it may be? Like, is the right thing to do is move everything to Croke Park, where we know that can be safe, and there's 6 games on in Croke Park at a weekend. Maybe Munster teams are only travelling as far as Thurles, and that we have a couple of hubs where the teams can play, where we know that all the best support and all the best resources are being pumped into these venues, so that we can ensure that everything's been kept safe, clean, and the welfare of the players has been put first.
And I think the big one, actually, if you think about, if a manager gets it, and there's a few old managers in the county game, not many as there maybe was, but if you think one of them, a manager gets it, and think probably all their close backroom staff will be close contacts, you think more than likely the players will, if they're sharing a dressing room. And I think then, all of a sudden, if a manager gets it, and then the whole dressing room's in doubt, and I think that will be the big worry for people.
Yeah, and I guess, look, on your dressing room point, Stephen, you look at Spurs, they're using the NFL dressing rooms. They have the resources to go to bigger dressing rooms to make it that bit safer. Outside of Croke Park, I can't see anywhere that we'd be able to do that. And the celebrations, to finish up on that, like, look at Liverpool and Leeds, the celebration in the UK. I know I was uncomfortable watching that. It almost kind of, having watched football for a couple of months and really enjoyed it, and then seeing the celebrations, you're like, Jesus, lads, come on. So again, you can only see that replicated if that happens.
And it is only natural, like,
Oh yeah, it's only natural.
There's people that have been following Mayo for 40, 50 years that haven't seen them win in All-Ireland. They've seen them, get so close. God, they need to, they need to celebrate if it happens. And then the GAA need to look and say, is it safe for them to do it? Probably not. Should the Inter-County, is it safe then for the Inter-County? And they need to be asking those questions. And it's good that the GPA have asked the Inter-County players. So, we'll hear a lot more from that in the coming days.
Well, we probably hear a lot more about it today, because the championships are due to start on Saturday. We were going to get to a preview. I don't think it's probably right at the moment with it up in the air. There's a Dublin Mead preview I wrote on the website earlier in the week if anyone wants to check it out. It's linked in the description. But listen, Stephen, we appreciate you coming on, and I'm sure we were going to have you back in a couple of weeks anyway for the championship preview. But look, we'll probably get you back maybe sooner than that if other stories break.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Stephen.
Premier League predictions next on the podcast.